Okay, we're back for the final chapter in the grandfather clock tutorial. This is more about the finishing touches. So I haven't yet glued in the clock face, and what I did do yesterday before I shut down for the night, so to let this dry overnight, was I coated the edges of the layers in this, it's a super glue with a brush. It's a little bit thick now because I've had it for a while, but you can see it comes with a brush. Ooh, where are we there? A brush. It's a bit gloopy. And it's a little bit thicker, and super glue is self-leveling. So I literally just paint that on across the layers at the sides as well as the top, and I let that dry. And what this does, because it's self-leveling, and as I said, you wouldn't use it with this because although it's clear, it doesn't dry exactly clear. So do it on when you're going to paint something. And once it's dried, you just get a piece of sandpaper and you can actually sand it. And although you can visually still see the layers through the super glue, when you come to paint it, it's nice and flat. And so it will actually give a much sort of more even surface than just the layers, which you can see there because I stained them. You can actually see where some of the glues come out. You can't really use this technique, although you could, if you could get a paint that was very similar to the stain to do the top. It wouldn't matter if it was slightly darker. But on my scrappy piece of sandpaper here. So you would do that, and then when you prime it and paint it, and I use a spray paint, you'll suddenly get a lovely, lovely smooth surface. The edges here, there's several ways to get in a curved edge. You can just bend the sandpaper so that this curve matches, get it to the right angle, that curve there, and you can do that. And always just kind of tidy up the edges as well. Or these are handy. This, hang on, get it from the long way, it's a stick covered in a sandpaper. This one's fine, you can get them in different grades. This would also, do it that way around, fit nicely into curves. And then you can also use needle files. That one's probably the more typical one you're used to. It's a steel one, a metal one. This is the diamond. They're not coming out very well, are they? That one, I don't know if you can see that. Diamond edged one, and they're gently curved again, so they're quite small for this, but they're good for smaller curves again. Or if you can't find these, just get a pencil, wrap your sandpaper around it, and that will get you a nice curve too. So that's one way of getting smoother layers, because even though you do your very best at gluing, you can still sometimes see the layers, even if you can't necessarily feel them. So there's a little bit of sanding. And then I don't know if you can see the difference between one that I've put the glue on there, but not sanded. You see it's not entirely smooth. And then that one there that I've done a little bit of sanding. Doesn't take much. Glue products on paper and card can lift the fibres, so if you did this sanding and then did another layer of super glue, it comes out super smooth. So you can do that on these top layers, and if it really bothered you, on these bottom layers too, you could do that. But I would do all of your sanding and smoothing before you paint. So I'm not going to paint this one today, but you can see how much smoother it looks. So that's that, and we've got the clock face, so we can glue that in now, and then we can glue that on, and you wouldn't want to do that before you did all your sanding, so I'm going to finish that one off later, that side. And then the next thing we want to do is to learn how to put the hinges on. Ribbon or ribbon tape is a really good hinge, and you would probably, if you're going to use that, want to incorporate the ribbon in between two of your layers, so think about that before you glue your layers together. But I like to use actual hinges. The lighting's not so great in here today, so that it works. But you'll see from that, that is half of a hinge. So it's the full one on the outside, but because the frame is only so deep, I had to cut the hinge in half. But it still holds it. I super glued it. So these are the type of hinges. I'll put a link to them. It's Minimum World, but I'll put a link to the exact hinge in the description below. They're super tiny, and they're quite hard to get open. Some of the hinges are stiffer than others, so you want to make sure that they work quite easily, otherwise you'll be bending the door before the hinge opens. That's how tiny they are. So if I get a ruler, hinges are often measured open, so that one is exactly 10mm or 1 centimetre wide, and then 8mm tall. In lights everywhere in here, reflecting everywhere. That's 8mm tall that way. So that's an 8mm by 10mm hinge. And then, if you can imagine, if I was going to glue this onto the inside, you could probably just get away with that one actually. And we want the barrel of the hinge on the outside. So that would be like, there's the barrel of the hinge on the outside. So it would go onto the clock face there. You've got the barrel there, and then the face of the frame, fits onto that top bit there. So that's the way that works. So if we take that off in that direction, we know that the frame is going to sit on it there. You can see, I don't know if you can see, that you would just see the edge of this hinge on the inside. So I'm going to cut this down. If you can find smaller hinges, ideal. If not, use a piece of ribbon along the whole of there. You could glue it on the outside, or like I say, trap it between the layers, and then glue it on the inside there. This is quite fiddly. These are metal shears. I have them anyway because I do the jewellery. So I'm going to aim to cut just that side of the holes. These aren't the best technical shears because I've used them for cutting sheet silver. But we'll give it a go. There we go. And they do bend the metal. You can see the bit I've cut off has curled. So always, if you've got some pliers, just straighten that back out again, so it will glue onto the frame in a nice flat surface. So if we stuck that on there now, you can see that you wouldn't see the frame through the hinge. So I'll get another one. And I mean, they do come with these tiny little brads or nails, but that would go there. That's way too thick for this material that we're using. 3 layers of Kraftboard. So again, make sure that you've got your hinge and that it opens nice and easily. It's a little bit stiff. Probably can just oil them as well a bit. Don't know if that one's that much easier. Yeah, that one is. I'll find an easier one. Have a play around with your hinges. That one feels a little easier. Yeah, so I'll use that one. And again, cut down to the other side of those holes there. Straighten it out. Make sure it still works. So we're going to put our glue on this edge here first, the smaller edge, and the barrel is pointing up. So if you can see that there, that's pointing up. And I'm going to use super glue, and I'll do one hinge at a time, and it's literally going to put it on like that there. So that we'll put glue on here, the sort of the cut down side, and put the frame on there like that. And you could measure out where you want them. We could do one hinge, but one hinges, things with one hinge can pivot a bit, so we'll go for 2. I've got super glue with a very tiny tip on the end. Where's that gone there? And you don't need much. You just don't want too much so that it goes into the hinge and stops the hinge working. And then keep your fingers out of the way and you just press that down and wait until it takes. And then do the same for the next one. Oops, I put a bit too much on there. This could be the hinge that doesn't work. Let me just see, is that gonna... It might still work. Press those down while they set. Oh, and don't take it off too soon. I'm just going to leave those set up a bit because it's movable. I don't want it to shift too much. Okay, if you have trouble with those slim hinges sticking, which I did just then, because this acetate layer doesn't provide an even surface for the whole of the hinge to stick across. Depends on the thickness of your material. So for this door, it wasn't a problem. They just stuck on across the 2 materials. They didn't seem to want to do that for this. So all you need to do is go back into Design Space and cut one of these layers again, and then glue it on the inside, and it covers the outside frame and the acetate then. So then your frame will look the same on both sides, but this side will be thinner, and so we're going to glue that on to cover that join, and then when we want to glue the hinge on, it's a nice flat surface. So I'll do that and press that, and then hopefully it should take. And this is one of those things with when you're creating your own files, you kind of have the flexibility to do this, and if something doesn't work, try something else. That's probably too much glue, I'm thinking now, because it might squeeze out onto the acetate now. So let's just wipe some of that off. And often can't repeat the same thing. So it worked for the middle section, didn't work so well, oops, for the frame, the top section. So we've got to improvise a little. Make sure you've got no glue on your fingers. That's going to smear the glass. And just gently line that up around. And squeeze it down so it will glue onto both the acetate and the frame underneath. So these edges in particular, make sure to squeeze those and use those clamps if necessary. So I'm going to put that under my bench block, and that will give it a really good level push down so that it's really nice and level. And I've got extra weights as well that I can use to do that. So put as many things on top as you need, get it nice and flat, and then the hinges should stick on no problem. So we'll come back in a minute. Okay, so I've glued that extra layer on there now. So you can see some marks there. I clamped it down also with these clamps. So on the outside I used a spare bit of Kraftboard to protect that, like we've done previously. So we've now got a nice flat surface, so we'll go through that again with the super glue and make sure our hinges work, and we want the barrel up facing up on the do that again, facing up where the frame is the right way around. So when we turn it over, the barrel is going to be pointing down, so you can see the open side there. And we will glue that on. Again, we don't want too much glue because we don't want it to go into the hinge. So just even it out. I find it easier to put it down onto the hinge this way. And super glue takes different sort of quickly on certain materials than on others, so you don't always know. That's going to stick to the mat now because it was too much super glue. There we go. So hopefully that hasn't gone in the hinge. I'll do the other one. Try and get less super glue on it this time. And then hold it. And I find it's easier to put it where it looks right on these door frames first, and then they'll just naturally glue in the right place onto the main body. So let that set up for a little while until you're sure that it's well and truly stuck. So that's what it will look like underneath and from the top. And always, if you've got some of these pliers, just put them over there, so we're sort of putting them either side of the hinge to bend this down and make sure that the hinge is still working. this is probably the most delicate part of the whole build, and I probably could have let my layers set up a bit more. And then you can see there, this will fit in very, I probably need to take a little bit off. It's quite firm as it is, so it would sit in there without the hinges. So if you can see there, it's a little bit stiff getting it in and out. So just sand down the top and bottom edges if you can feel where it's catching. And if you want to sand something and you think, oh, the material's starting to fray, just put a bead of super glue along there. And the super glue just sinks down into the craft board, stops it fraying, and actually gives you a surface to sand. And then keep doing that until you're happy that it goes in and out more easily. It still sticks a little there. I'm not sure that that isn't bowed in slightly. Yeah, just check. It could be that this top edge could just do with just tweaking out a little bit as well. There we go. So you can see there, now the hinges sit on the outside. So have I glued that in? Yes, I have. We're going to do the same thing, put the super glue on the inside now, very sparingly, both at the same time, and then we can put that in there, and then we'll slide it up. This is why it's always good to do a practice run first. If it's going to catch on something, find out now. So see if you can slide it up. If that's too awkward, we'll just go in from the front. We just want to make sure we can press those hinges down, not with your fingers in case super glue comes out. So we'll go for that. These aren't as straight as I'd like them. And it, again, just a little bit of super glue. Keep your fingers out of the way. I'm going to go straight down for this one because I'm happy that it will clip in like that. Put it on its side so you can see that it's pressed in, and then use something else to put them, make sure it's pressed down that way. I'm going to have hands all over the place, and press that down there. That's it. So that it looks like that. And you want as small a gap as possible here, so it's pushed in, let me get my hands in the right, that way as well as over that way, so that this edge is nice and flush. So just keep pushing down gently until it's taken. And I would leave that for a while myself before I try to open it. But what I am going to show you while we've got it this way is that if you do this, you can cut a spare side, if you remember, of the clock face, whichever clock face front you're doing, you can cut one of these sides and you can use that over the hinges and just glue that on the side to cover up the hinges. Let me just move it forward a bit like that, and then we'll just need to make sure we press it down from the front so you don't see the gap there. And again, we don't want too much glue on the leading edge where the hinges are going, because we don't want it to bleed out and go into the hinge and stop the hinge working. slide that onto there and then push it down that way. And you want to make sure that you press it down in between there. Can you see that? Either side of those hinges. Just your fingernails enough to bend the craft board. So that looks like that. And that also then helps to reinforce the hinges. And you could do that on the inside of the frame as well. Once you've glued your hinge like this, you could always put another one of these over those hinges to hide them and support them on the inside. So while that sets up, the only other thing to think about are the knobs and handles. And these, again, like the hinges, I like to buy them, get them made out of metal. It adds a nice finishing touch. So this one, you can see, is a very lovely little turned, how close can I get that without the lights? See the lovely little turned handle there. That's from this company, Houseworks. And again, I think I got this in Minimum World, but I'll make sure I put all the links in. And so you get several in a packet. So I can't even remember how much they were, but you do get several. So they come with a tiny little spur on them. Let me get one out. Let's see. It'll stick to my finger and not fall off. So on the right is the spur that I'm talking about. On the left is the handle. And so this sticking out bit here, let me get there, that bit there, you could drill a hole and put that in, only this isn't thick enough. So I used some of these pliers and snip that off, and then use a needle file if there's a little lump left, and I would file that down. So that's what I did for this one. So it hasn't been drilled through, it's just been stuck on, and that works perfectly well. And you can do that also for this top here. Let me just see if it opens now. It's just, yeah, it does give. It's slightly weak in that bit there, so I could re-glue that, but these hinges were a bit stiff as well. So we could use one of those little ones on there, and I also found some other cute ones, little pull drop handles. Streets Ahead, these are made by. And let me see if I can show you that. The lighting in here today is not great. It's sort of has the top and then this bit dangles down. Can you see that there? And then that bit moves. So you would put that probably, it's quite large for these. I would imagine it would look better at that on this part. I think it's too big for the top part. And also in white it doesn't look so cool, so it would look better on that brown, although you can't see brown on brown. So have a look and see what little fittings you can get. And you could also just use a bead glued on, and I've done that before for drawer handles and things like that. So that is it. I hope you've enjoyed making those. Do post them and tag me in on them if you put them on Facebook or Instagram. I'd love to see what you come up with, especially if you do any variation on colours, and also I'd like to see which combination of tops and middles that you go for. Subscribe if you haven't already to our newsletter so you'll see any more updates and new files that are coming out. And thank you for joining me for this series, and I'll see you soon.